And we're live. Georgi Dinkov, how are you, sir?
Not bad, not bad. Still afloat.
Yeah, we're just commenting on my extremely red appearance. I don't know what's going on. I'm gonna blame the camera here, but we'll just have to go with it. There's nothing I can do.
It is what it is. At least we're live, right? I mean, as long as people can hear the voice and can see something moving, it should be okay.
Exactly. Before we get into the questions, we always get into what I thought that last Ray episode was extremely good. You know, I feel like the high of having like a good episode with him or even you know, is there's nothing like it, you know, and I thought we touched on so many great subjects last time and I was just so pleased with it.
Yep. I concur. And I've been getting good reports over email too. So I think people liked it too.
Yeah, no. And also I don't think that show could have existed without the super awesome questions that we got from readers, you know, and I put those out on Monday and then we just got a bunch of super interesting questions. So that show being good is really a part of the viewers and the awesome questions that we receive. So thank you guys. Sincerely appreciate it. What's new in Georgi land?
I don't know if there's anything new. I mean, we're waiting to see what the DC public schools will decide in terms of testing. Basically, they've tried to mandate the vaccine for all teachers, and now apparently like teachers are quitting in droves. So we'll see if there's even going to be like a sufficient staff for schools to open 3 weeks from now. It's still not decided, and then they're still wondering and thinking what to do with the testing because they kind of want to test 10% of the kids on a random rotating basis throughout the entire year, vaccinated or not, it doesn't matter. And many parents refuse to sign the consent form, which is about that nasal swab, right? A few kids, from what I hear, had like a bleeding event. That like they ruptured a blood vessel or something, and it was like one of them was pretty dangerous. Like basically, the kid passed out from blood loss, ended up in the hospital, and now like of course the government doesn't want to get sued, so they're thinking they're trying to figure out what else they can do, or like can they do it actually without the consent form? That's really the scary part. Like there was an article that I saw today, which was a discussion amongst like journalists are talking to the DC council people who essentially run the city. The mayor is just a figurehead, more or less. And the discussion was, well, do you guys think you'll be able to test without the parents consenting? So it's actively being discussed and planned. And the council did not answer, which to me is there's definitely something in the works in regards to that, especially now that they have the law that says you can vaccinate children as young as 11 without parental consent. I think that they'll be able, some lawyer at the DC level will probably come up with a statement saying that, well, if we're allowed to vaccinate, which is much more risky, why wouldn't we be allowed to test without consent?
Yeah, I think after we talked at some point, I was talking to somebody in Slovenia. Am I saying that right? And
yeah.
And she said she works as a park ranger, and she was saying, yeah, my employer said if I don't want to get vaccinated, I'm gonna have to pay for a test every single time I work. And I think the cost of the test was so high that it made working like kind of dumb. Like it
was 100 throughout the entire European Union is basically the equivalent of $100, and they want it twice a week.
That's insane.
So the countries that basically allowed the unvaccinated to have their freedom said, okay, don't want to vaccinate. The mask is not going to save it. We wouldn't care about the mask anymore, but you still have to wear it. And even then, if you want to show up at work, if the work is required, then you have to pay for tests twice a week. A la carte, because the insurance is not going to cover it. There's no, I mean, whatever, the health system, whatever, because in European Union, most countries have a single payer system. So the system is not going to cover that. So clearly it's like, it's getting to the point where it's voluntary, but not really. I'm sure you already saw what happened in France. Oh. It's basically mandatory at this point for anybody who wants to go and sit at a cafe. And now I saw an article on I don't know if it was Zero Hedge or like Russia Today, said that now, surprise, surprise, French bars and restaurateurs are appalled that their clients refuse to be asked about the vaccination status and are driving a short distance away to Belgium where there are no such requirements, and they're dining and eating there and then coming back. So now the restaurateurs are freaking out and asking Macron to prevent clients from going to other countries. So at which point, I think it's going to be ridiculous. Basically, they're saying you will come to our place and you will sit here and pay for the test and consume and pay these prices and you will be happy, right? just like Schwab,
Yeah, yeah.
Charles Schwab. That's essentially what he said. You'll have nothing, and you will be happy
They'll
because
have
we tell you
everything.
to be so. Yeah, exactly.
What I saw something, just a blurb about interstate travel being also necessitating a vaccine.
It's
And
a discussion, but I think that Twitter post that I saw said that the administration at the time, they didn't say when this was discussed, at the time decided it will be too polarizing, which is, a euphemism for it's going to cause a riot.
That means they'll put it into place in 6 months. I feel like,
or you'll be part of like one of those bills that they're passing. You'll be how they always do that, right? They whenever they want to pass something unpopular, they make it as like an addendum to the budget, to whatever budget they're approving every year. So they'll probably try to do the same thing this year.
Jumping back to what you first said, I mean, are you thinking about pulling your kids out of school or anything?
I mean, if it gets to the point where basically they say like I'll see what happens with the because their parents here who have now hired lawyers and they will actually get an answer out of the council. People say, listen, you have to tell us if you're planning to test without consent. You can't just be silent on this, yes or no. And if the answer is yes, then I think basically I would say pretty much anybody with children in DC, at least half of those people, because DC, despite whatever the news tell you, if you go and look at even the official stats, which are heavily manipulated, DC is basically 60% vaccinated. But the remaining 40% is almost entirely minorities. And the Biden administration is probably not going to push minorities to get forcibly vaccinated. and if they're trying to, and many of the teachers, if not most of them in the DC public schools are minorities. So if you're making if you're making their job impossible, I think it's going to create a ruckus and a riot probably, right? So Biden will be at a crossroads. So like, does he turn on his own constituents or no? So we'll see. But if it gets to the point of if I catch a wind of the DC Council kind of like leading towards testing secretly without actual consent, then we're done. I mean, we're going to move across the river to Virginia or a few miles north to Maryland.
I'm super hesitant to say this, but there's early talks of creating some kind of Mexico retreat. And so this is so premature for me to even talk about this, but I think that people are motivated to do that here, and we might bounce it off Ray. And so again, excellent. I was mostly joking about you coming here, but I really think you should give it a good thought. Like,
it is in consideration. Trust me, nothing is off the table. The way things are going, we'll see what happens. I mean, I think I don't see this relenting anytime soon. And I don't know if you saw, but now the CDC is talking about a new virus. I forgot the name, but it starts with an M.
Lambda or something.
No, Lambda, like a totally new virus with an 80%, 85% lethality, coming out of Africa again.
If you're on a ventilator in the hospital, it's 100% lethal.
Right.
Yeah.
Something not maybe Magruder. I don't know if it's Magruder or something like that. Let me just do a quick check.
You check. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on this Friday evening. Thank you so much. Sincerely appreciate it. We have an amazing listenership. It's a small amount of people, but you guys are you're so great, and it makes this show so fun to do with Georgie here. Did you find it? Guys, hit the like button. That really, we appreciate that. It supports the show. And as trivial as it is, it's nice to see if you guys actually like the show. And also if you comment, I think that just helps in general with, knowing that we're producing things that you guys actually enjoy. So hit that like button. Sincerely appreciate it. We have another computer here. I got a new computer today. And so we shouldn't have those overheating issues that we've been having for a long time.
Yeah, just a second.
It
was really, because the article was basically saying now that the COVID narrative is falling apart, not that they'll stop pushing it, but basically, they're looking for a new, not for a new scapegoat, but for a new scarecrow. And the new one is a virus similar to Ebola, and it's coming out of Africa. So
does it have the ring of coronavirus, COVID?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think they're kind of testing the water. So if you remember, like a week or two ago, they started talking about like a highly treatment-resistant fungal infections.
Oh yeah, the monkey
in several cities.
Yeah.
That I guess that didn't stick. So now they're just like trying to come up with whatever will stick. And I think they're trying to scare people with like the 85% lethality. But again, like the virus that is really lethal doesn't tend to do very well in terms of a pandemic, simply because like it kills quickly the hosts, and basically it just doesn't have the same impact. It's like a less lethal but highly more virulent strain is actually much scarier. So I don't know if they've thought about that, but I'm starting to think that they're just like literally like digging through whatever past pandemics they created or recorded and say, John, do you think this will work? Like, can you try like some of your people in the media try to run with this and see what happens?
I'm sure they probably do that. Well, the one other thing I was going to mention was somebody put together a bunch of headlines of like a fake vaccine cards. And so I think they're obviously prepping people for some kind of digital passport. That I think that's probably the next step for sure. That's tied to your identification.
I will be very curious to see how this will play out at the federal level, because unlike European Union, basically the states is a federation. So we'll see. I mean, like, didn't some states already pass laws explicitly prohibiting like stuff like this from ever being implemented at the state level? I think Florida, Montana, the two Dakotas, and I think Wyoming and Texas explicitly said no vaccine passport whatsoever, and it's now a state law.
And Guanajuato, San Miguel de Allende.
Yeah, the Marburg virus.
Say it again.
Marburg, Marburg. Oh. So if you go to like, there's a Zero Hedge article that it's titled "Here We Go Again." Who announces the Marburg virus? And basically it says like they're scaring people that it's got an 85% fatality rate.
M-A-R.
Marburg.
Oh,
Marburg virus.
Marburg virus.
Oh, 88%. I'm sorry.
I don't know. I trust anything on the CDC's and the WHO's website.
Oh, it's coming from bats too. Did you scroll up? Did you see the picture?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those are bats. This is just never gonna. It's becoming so laughable at this point that I don't know.
Well, what was the?
I mean, I don't know if you see the discussions on the forum, but basically, there's this guy Sweetmeat. It goes by the alias Sweetmeat. He seems to be like he doesn't think there's the population agenda. He basically thinks there's a purposeful dumbing down of Americans' agenda, and basically China and Russia are running the show, and America is beyond salvation simply because the population has the amount of idiots in the population has reached critical mass. So if America stays united, nothing. I mean, basically, it's done, right? These people are sufficiently large number to prevent any kind of a progress. Mm-hmm. So it's either sedition or secession, whatever the name is, or war. And he makes no secret of his disdain. I think he's American. I mean, his English is impeccable, and he doesn't speak with British idioms. So I suspect he's just an expatriate. He said he does not live in the United States. But he's got a pretty good grasp on the economic aspects of COVID, and basically saying, look, the Western world is done in. I mean, basically, there's nothing that the Western world produces that the rest of the world wants, right? So it's either forcefully imposed on the rest of the world by military invasions or by like installing puppet governments. Or like basically it's and the second thing is the dollar is the fiat reserve currency of the world. He says either one of these things goes away, it's over. It's completely game over. And he's basically saying that there's nothing. So while the military is around, right, the dollar may stay as a reserve currency, but he's saying the dumber the population becomes, the more and more China and Russia are going to be able to manipulate or even outright buy U.S. politicians to get them to do their agenda, and it seems like the population is too dumb to even realize what's going on. Like even basic concepts like inflation, deflation, their savings being destroyed. And I kind of concur with that too. I've spoken to other people. I don't want to bash on the Americans. I've spoken to foreigners who immigrated to America and just like me, try to make a life here. And they're pretty much in the same boat. As long as they're getting their paycheck, to them everything's fine. All of these masks, vaccines, whatnot, they're perfectly acceptable. If there's going to be a vaccine passport, they'll take it, thinking that this will return things to normal. And when you point out that things are not getting back to normal despite the vaccine and everything else, basically they're saying, again, like they kind of freak out. They look at you like, why are you spoiling my day? Like, why are you coming up with this like fear-mongering stuff? It's like, who are you? Do you have a diploma to discuss the virus thing at all? So, I mean, it's kind of my opinion too. He's basically saying like we've gotten to the point where if a sufficient number of people have completely given up on like trying to perceive reality, right, and even do like a minimum of effort to evaluate for yourself what the world really is all about, then he's saying it's over. There's nothing you can do.
And making the country like a large prison, and then stupefying the public, and then also mass migration as well. Like there's a book called Weapons of Mass Migration, so that can be weaponized. And
whatever is being done to the European Union right now with the Middle Eastern migrants, the same thing will be done here with migration from the south.
But you think or this person was saying that's all in an effort to, if the populace is like completely stupefied, then the oligarchs can do whatever they want and play the empire wars. Is that what you're saying?
So I think he's saying that. So we're excluding the elite, right? The elite is basically always in charge. They're trying to subjugate China and Russia. Really scary thought is that the elite is actually in bed with China to just achieve the one world government. In that case, I would say it's game over, right? I mean, if China has the economy and the U.S. has the military, not that China's military is any weak, right? But basically, like, what pockets of resistance are remaining? And I mean, I'm starting to lean in that direction too, because look, the elites are heavily invested in China too. I mean, Tesla is allowed to be there. Many of the big tech, American big tech companies are allowed to expand in China as well. Why would China allow that, knowing full well that these companies will be hostile and predatory towards the local economy? They don't care about China. They'll do whatever they did to America or to other countries, try to like extract as much as possible and then dump, right? And then move on to the next cause. So I think he's basically saying that America has reached a point where it's too decadent to matter, but too big to go away. And basically he's saying like, one thing that can change things is all-out nuclear war. Then all bets are off. We don't know what's going to happen.
Man, I should have.
But he's saying nobody wants that, right? And he's basically saying that now, basically, if the Chinese and the Russians are calling the shot economically, they're saying, okay, so what do we do with the Americans to prevent a nuclear war, considering that it still has a military and still has nuclear weapons? Well, let's just dumbify and zombify them as much as possible, right? And give them some kind of money, but at the expense of we controlling every aspect of their life to prevent any kind of like a mass awakening event.
I wish I had it. My buddy sent me a Telegram link to like some what's it called? And I can't talk tonight. It was like a like a simulation of a bomb or like a nuclear blast going off in a New York subway or something. Do you seen anything about this?
Oh my God. When was this done?
I think fairly recently. I wish I had the link. It's not worth talking about if I can't find it. If we had more time, maybe I would. I mean,
how do you simulate an event like that? The outcome would be evaporated in New York City, even like a small thermonuclear like a warhead detonated anywhere. Like even if it's in one of the tunnels, you're still talking about essentially wiping out Manhattan.
I hope I didn't misspeak. If I had Telegram on this computer, I could open it up, but I don't. Anyways, okay. Any other things you want to chat about before we get into articles?
No, not really. I mean, it's the same stuff, just progressing, looking at what's going on. Ray seems to have some faith that apparently there's like this massive lawsuit filed by doctors and a bunch of lawyers that basically forcing now private employers, because Biden is working the private employers and saying, look, we can't enforce it at the federal level, but you guys can start asking your employees to be vaccinated. And if they're not, you can fire them, right? So basically apparently there's like a big lawsuit that was filed already. Ray sent some emails to people who asked him about this, saying that, the lawsuit says like it's violation of the Nuremberg Code, right? It's also discrimination, right? All these things. But I just saw today that Amy Coney Barrett, right, which was a Trump appointee, she just denied a petition from Indiana University students to have the Indiana University mandate on the vaccine for returning to classes. They said this is unconstitutional. It's violation of all of our rights. These are experimental treatments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And since this was her district, I didn't know you could petition an individual Supreme Court justice. I guess you can, depending on where they're coming from. And she refused to hear the case, returning back to the federal court at a lower level, which sided with the university, saying that Basically, it's yes, you can mandate the experimental vaccine. So I'm thinking there isn't much hope for that lawsuit because the court system is also compromised. I mean, if anything, I would think that the powers that be would probably first try to subvert the court system, because that's the one thing that, at least on paper, is semi-independent from the government.
Judge didn't want their pedo tape to be released, so they sided with the school.
That's right.
Okay, guys, give this episode a like. Sincerely appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out on this Friday evening. Subscribe on Telegram, t.me/Danny Roddy. And I've been posting a lot of content that I haven't been posting on Twitter, like some slightly longer form things. And so check out that, as long as it's still good. You know, I think it's not being censored at the moment. We'll talk about Idealabs in a second here, but maybe we should go through a few articles first. Are there any of these that you really dug?
Let's have you pick. Which one did anything caught your eye?
Well, I put hysteresis on like the title of this, and so I thought that cellular memory of stress was interesting.
Yeah. Well, and this is a good article because it's kind of like a follow up on the one that I don't know if you've seen. It was posted on the forum maybe back in 2014 by Blossom in regards to one of Pete's newsletters, which was about transgenerational epigenetic effects of stress. And I think the study at the time said that these are inherited for up to 14 generations. And they used a worm model simply because the worm, like these tiny worms, they live for about a week or two. So you can actually do like a relatively large number of iterations with the generations and see what happens. Well, this study now says that neuronal memory, epigenetic memory of stress, manifested in change of whatever proteins the neurons are supposed to synthesize internally, can actually be passed on for more than 50 generations in the same worm model. And it specifically affects the mitochondria. So I thought that's I mean, if 14 is a large number, 50 is really should get people to like pay attention. And I don't know if you've seen some of the comments that people started posting on Twitter when this showed up. Basically, most of the comments were, look, at this point is abundantly clear. The lifestyle that we're currently leading is killing us, and not only us, but basically it will ensure that your genetic line will disappear from the gene pool if you continue to lead that stressful lifestyle. So it's either now or never. We have to fundamentally change the way we live and interact with nature, which I thought was like pretty good, because kind of almost verbatim quotes Pete, which he basically said that the current lifestyle is unsustainable. Forget about the gene level. The human race will disappear if it continues down that path. Now, the good news is that, as one of the people posted on the forum, because these are already in the forum as well, is that another study demonstrated that even that most of these things, the transgenerational epigenetic heritable effects of stress, can be reversed in even a single generation, even less than a single generation, if the environment becomes more optimal. And by more optimal, I think the study specifically looked at basically reducing inflammation, because that's really the driving factor behind most of the effects of stress. It's true inflammation, but ultimately, of course, reduction in oxidative phosphorylation. And that study on reversal demonstrated, forgot the drug that he used, I suspect it was ibuprofen. Just administering ibuprofen reversed most of these accumulated transgenerational epigenetic heritable effects of stress.
What's that? Well, I'm sure we've talked about it before. It's like an article on rats or something, and they give them like an orange scent, and then they maybe they shock them or something, and then they found that would be passed down transgenerationally to like multiple offspring, and so the offspring would never have experienced that smell and then the shock, but when it was
actually cat urine.
Yeah, it was cat urine.
And then they also did it with citrus, because first they did cat urine, right? And rats are apparently like typically not afraid of it if they never encounter a cat in their life. Mm-hmm. But then they thought, oh, maybe the cats have some kind of a genetic thing. So they confirmed that basically if you expose a specific generation to cat urine smell, right, then the subsequent generations will already have that inherited a fear of that smell. So they already know this is a sign of something bad being present, like a predator, right? But then they thought, like, well, cats are natural predators to rats. Maybe the rats have some kind of a genetic thing encoding, even though a cat-fearing gene has never been discovered. They said, well, let's see if it's really like the specific to cats or true to like smells in general. That's when they did the citrus smell, and they shocked them and basically taught these rats to fear the citrus smell, or at least associate it with a highly unpleasant event. And subsequent generations were again afraid of the citrus smell, while normal rats who weren't trained, weren't shocked, actually love the citrusy smell because it actually has a known powerful antidepressant effect. Not so when you're being taught to fear it.
And maybe you mentioned it, I missed it, but where it's just the proteins of the cell that contain a memory, and it's not like that's just how it is.
Yeah, it changes. So each cell produces more or less unique proteins that are reflective of that specific tissue or organ, right? And basically, like it changes both the amount and the types of proteins these cells produce. It's related to the heat shock proteins, if you remember the Pete's newsletter. So this specific study didn't talk about these heat shock proteins, but it's known that when the cells are exposed to stress chronically, they increase their synthesis of the heat shock proteins at the expense of reduced synthesis of other proteins, and basically the cells become less vital, I shouldn't say less vital. They can't divide as many times as basically cells that haven't been stressed. So they basically increase their temporary direct resistance to the specific stress they were exposed to by production of the heat shock proteins, but it decreased their long-term viability. So the same thing seems to be in place here. Basically, they discovered this one protein, which is associated with several neurological pathologies. And when the neurons were stressed, the mitochondria started producing more of that protein, and that remained, that elevated synthesis of that protein, pathological protein, remained elevated for more than 50 generations.
Yeah, there was a quote I was looking for, but it was something like what the offspring inherits from its parents is not its like robustness, but rather its frailty or something like that, like the susceptibilities to certain things in the environment. So anyways, something we've talked about on the show.
I mean, if you think about it, like basically, if you try to pass something down in your generation, it makes little sense to pass a memory of the good times, right? Because they're generic. Like there's nothing specific to feeling great, right? It's just a generic systemic feeling. However, each specific stressor and or danger tends to be fairly unique, right? So if you ever met a cat, you can pass down the generations the experience of meeting a cat if you're a rat, right? But in terms of like what exactly is the encoding of a rat feeling great and being happy and living a great rat life, I don't know if there's a way to pass that down the generations.
Well, it's funny because
it's mostly because it's non-specific, right? It's the specific things that can be passed, and these tend to be associated with specific exposures to stress, toxins, predators, etc.
Well, it's funny because it provides an explanation for like arachnophobia and all these types of weird things that people have really big aversions to, basically it said that so-called ancestral memory, it's really that it's at the biological level, and basically it comes down to essentially specific changes in protein synthesis that can be passed down epigenetically in direct violation of the what was that dogma, the guy with W, the Weissman dogma. Yeah. There was I'm thinking hate flick limit or whatever. Anyways.
No, the hate flick limit is cell division, but there's the Weissman dogma, which says that stroma and basically the gonadal cells are insulated from the rest of the body, and basically like they have their genes which never change unless they mutate somehow, and your life experiences have no effect on the gonadal cells, and you can't pass nothing down the generations. This has already been conclusively proven wrong.
Weissman was the cutting off the tail dude, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, great stuff. Let's jump to, I like the endotoxin one. I like the aspirin one. I like the metabolically children one. Which one did you want to, endotoxin or aspirin?
The endotoxin is pretty good because it's one of the actually very rare study where directly it says that basically the elevation of blood levels of endotoxin preceded first like the accumulation of fat, especially visceral fat. Second, the establishment of chronic inflammation, then the establishment of insulin resistance, and finally the basically the formation of diabetes. And they said that this is apparently a very well known fact. It's just that nobody is willing to call it a cause. They continue to call it a correlation, but this study specifically says that according to them, the link is causative, because every single study that has looked at this has demonstrated that basically before an organism develops any of these conditions, obesity, insulin resistance, or type 2 diabetes, or a chronic inflammatory condition, it is always preceded by a chronic elevation of endotoxin in the bloodstream.
Yeah, I remember seeing this paper and archiving it immediately. It says like the primary metabolic effect of endotoxin is increased is increased lipolysis and may lead to diabetes together with stress. Imagine thinking that your keto diet, which promotes lipolysis, is just like you're nobody thinks endotoxin is good, but that like this paper is saying the primary effect is promoting the liberation of fatty acids. It's just kind of.
And since keto diet will raise your cortisol and mimic the effects of stress, you're getting both things, both goodies in the same package.
Yeah, there was another one I scrolled by here. The cortisol response to endotoxin follows a dose-response relationship. Patients with gram-negative infections have been shown to have marked elevation of their plasma triglycerides or free fatty acids.
Yep.
Yeah. Was there? Go ahead.
I mean, and I think I mentioned in the study about HDL cholesterol. I think there was another study that I posted on a blog basically demonstrate that the HDL cholesterol is basically what carries the endotoxin and deactivates it. It prevents it from harming the liver. I think there may be another link, another post on that. This one was specifically for let me see, liver disease.
HDL cholesterol might interfere with lipopolysaccharide detection by immune cells on the receptor.
Yep. Scroll down more. Oh yeah, that's the one. I think I posted 2 studies in the same post.
Oh, okay.
So the first one talks about elevation of cholesterol as basically preceding the formation of any of these diseases, and the second one says that a deficiency of HDL production greatly exacerbates the effects of endotoxemia because HDL, specifically HDL3, which they mentioned there in the italics, is the one that's produced in the intestine. So apparently some of the HDL that's produced in the liver by itself, it has other functions, and some of it can be produced in the intestine, the specific subtype HDL3, and that's the one that binds the endotoxin when it's formed in the intestine and basically carries it in the liver, but it's already deactivated. The endotoxin, when bound to HDL, doesn't have the same pro-inflammatory effects that cause liver disease. But without it, and they actually created a mouse without it by removing a good portion of the intestine, which is a common procedure in people with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, because their intestine gets damaged to the point where surgeons think it's better to take it out because it's just going to cause an infection or something, a deadly one. So apparently, like the inability to produce HDL can directly lead to liver disease, which endotoxin causes. Now, I don't know of any study. I mean, I shouldn't say there are studies that claim that endotoxin can cause liver disease, but human medicine claims that endotoxin is only dangerous to the livers that are already severely compromised. That by itself, endotoxin is harmless, and the liver quickly deactivates it. I mean, at least when it comes to the animal studies, that they show that the exact opposite is true, is that endotoxin is directly harmful to the liver, and the body has a specific mechanism for deactivating the endotoxin, which is synthesizing HDL3. Guess what? The synthesis of HDL3 depends on thyroid hormone. So another reason why hypothyroid people may have a very high comorbidity in terms of very high rate of liver disease comorbidity. Various types, not just like a inflamed liver, but like fatty liver and fibrotic diseases like cirrhosis and things like that.
Well, this is also why Ray has said many times you don't want your HDL to be high, because that means you're in kind of a defensive mode, whether it be high estrogen or high endotoxin.
Yes, but you also don't want it to be low either. Mm-hmm. So basically, if it's high, if it's acutely high, it's an inflammatory biomarker, just like ferritin, right? Now, and that's a good thing because it means you can muster up a defensive response. However, if you have chronic inflammation and your HDL is not high, that's a bad sign. It means you're not mustering up the anti-inflammatory response, because most of the inflammation in the body is due to either PUFA or endotoxin, and the two synergize. Mm-hmm. So it's I would say it's better to respond to basically have higher levels of HDL, but not chronically. So the worst thing is to have chronically low HDL levels, especially in the presence of confirmed inflammation, because that means your intestines and or liver are incapable of mustering up the deactivation response, right? The second worst is basically there is inflammation and then your HDL is high, right? Which is a good thing. I mean, you're responding to it, but again, you're still responding to a pathological situation. And I guess the best thing would be for HDL to be in the normal range, and it's unique because the range for HDL has not changed much, unlike things for thyroid, TSH, testosterone, which keep getting prolactin, which keep getting changed all the time. The range for HDL has stayed fairly constant over the last more than 50 years.
I think I saw a prolactin range yesterday from like 3 to 24 or something.
Oh, they raised it again?
It was like the stupidest range I've ever seen. Like at 20, you're such a world of hurt. It's really, but you're in range, so no worries there.
Right, you're in range, no worries, right? And at that point, your testosterone will be in the 200s. And did you see that link about the guys from BuzzFeed, the journalist, the male journalist who tested the testosterone?
No, I didn't see it.
Just do a quick search on Google and type BuzzFeed journalist testosterone.
You're saying these?
There you go.
They need some of the DHT.
It's the second one. So can you go back to the search results? The second one. BuzzFeed guys tested testosterone levels. The results surprised nobody.
Oh no, we're on Daily Wire here.
Well, 4 of them, and 3 of them were actually hypogonadal, despite being in the early 20s. 3 of them were hypogonadal, even according to the official range, and only 1 guy was in the 300s. And by the way, the normal range for testosterone, the lower end gets progressively lowered. Well, and it used to be 363, which is the guy who had the highest one, actually, the highest. This one used to be actually below the lower bound of normal about 20 years ago.
85-year-old man would have a typical 376 nanograms per deciliter. I see those all the time.
So basically, and if you look at these people, basically, it's pretty. It kind of correlates well with the testosterone levels. You will think that these are fairly feminized men.
Well, there's a funny video of them. Not funny. It's like horrifying of them waiting for Fauci to like enter the call, and it's like it's the lamest thing you've ever seen in your entire life. Great stuff. Okay, HDL endotoxin. Close that one. Guys, I'd love to read the donations we're getting. Look on the screen here. I'm clicking this button and I cannot see the people that have donated. This is like some glitch on YouTube. So Conrad so far and Marcelo and these other people that I didn't read last time, KT, Goli, Pure Therapy, Spencer Steele. Thank you guys so much. I was going to read all the names today and I can't even get into it.
Can you open this link in another browser?
No,
sometimes the browser blocks JavaScript or something.
I have 3 computers right now. I tried it on all 3 computers. It didn't work.
And it's not working. Okay.
So I don't know what to do.
So either YouTube is down or it's messing with you.
Probably just fucking with me like always. Okay. Let's maybe aspirin. I put that in the headline.
I mean, it's kind of sensitive, but I guess we have to say, because it's, even though we may get censored, yet another confirmation that humble aspirin can actually be, well, not actually, it definitely beats remdesivir hands down. It beats ivermectin hands down, because none of these treatments, one of them proposed by Big Pharma and the powers that be, and the other one being the darling of the rebels, so-called the anti-vaxxers and the anti-covidians. So aspirin beats both of these because it decreased hospitalization, exacerbations, and mortality by 40 to 50%. And if you look at the dosages that they basically tracked, it was a baby aspirin up to a single tablet. So that's a laughable dose, right? I mean, if there is a dose response relationship, that means that just taking 2 or 3 tablets of aspirin may be all you need in order to laugh COVID off and not even worry about any kind of a brush with the white coats. Because once you get to the hospital, at that point, all bets are off. I mean, they have so many different agendas there, and you're the least of their priorities, your health and well-being. Everything comes down to following some kind of a procedure, usually to protect their butts legally, and not so much to save you. And I'm afraid to say in some hospitals, they want to have more deaths from COVID because they get more funding from the federal government.
In the paper, you said, I am or this person is a Peter.
It's the author.
Papadak. How do you say that, Georgi?
Papadakos.
That's really good. I'm a firm believer that aspirin a day keeps the doctor away. He said, aspirin, which has been around for more than 100 years, offers some positive anti-inflammatory effects in, what does it stand for? Or respiratory
acute respiratory distress syndrome, which is what most people with viral diseases end up in the hospital with if it gets really bad. And actually, the good thing is that if you look at the quote that I had in red, he says that basically it's not only anti-inflammatory, but it's also anticoagulant. And now they're starting to say that COVID-19 is essentially an inflammatory and coagulative disorder, right? So if you can address both things with a single pill, it's really great. And that's. I mean, they're pretty upbeat. If you read the actual study and the conclusion, they're kind of saying that I don't even know why everybody's bothering with ivermectin and remdesivir and whatnot. Like, we got this great thing here. We know its side effect profile better than any other drug, right? We know actually how to mitigate whatever little risks it has. It's dirt cheap. It's available everywhere. Why are we not using it again?
Plus,
I wanted to say, because you're going to lose your medical license if you're going to prescribe it to anybody.
Plus, it's super anti-cancer. I love this quote, and I have a compulsory need to read it every time we talk about aspirin. But this is Ray, and he says, if a newly discovered substance had aspirin's anti-infective, anti-cancer, anti-stress, antioxidant, and anti-inflammatory actions, it would be the most researched substance in history.
Oh, to his chagrin, or I shouldn't say not to his detriment, but like, to be a contrarian, it is the most researched substance in history. It's just not. It's actually the least marketed substance in history. But if you go to PubMed, I challenge you to find another chemical that has more studies behind it than aspirin. Just type aspirin in there, look at the number of results that come back, and I challenge you to find me another thing that has the same amount of studies behind it.
There are even like mainstream articles about aspirin's. I don't know.
Of course. Yeah. And I'm surprised to see it coming from the New York Times, but I guess they'll be pulling, and that was from 2020. I guarantee you that link will not survive for too long.
And there was a ProPublica, I'm sure we've talked about this before. It was MIA in the war on cancer. Where are the low cost, the low cost treatments? And they specifically mentioned aspirin.
Look, I mean, as you know, at this point, I'm already publishing studies. I've had a few interactions with peer review committees and editorial committees and people at journals. Like, they're basically act as the gatekeepers. I mean, off the record, they all say that if you come back with a study that shows that, let's say, aspirin cures cancer, and if you have the word cure or curative anywhere in your abstract, anywhere in your text, you're done. We don't care that you've paid the review fee. We don't care that who you are, especially a nobody like you. Like, it goes without saying. But we don't care about your degrees or whoever else is submitting it. If you ever associate in your writing aspirin with a cure and cancer, these three words together, this study will not be published in our journal. Find another one.
This says, the author Holmes said, what is scientific and sexy is driven by what can be monetized, she says, and that becomes the norm.
Remember, like, we always get in these criticisms like, oh, guys, it's just a bunch of conspiracy theories saying that big pharma will never pursue something because it's not financially feasible. That's a conspiracy theory. And guess what? 2 years ago, that company that came out with a treatment, the curative treatment for hepatitis C, remember, Goldman Sachs came out, Goldman Sachs senior analyst responsible for biotech reviews and for rating all these companies, came up with a special editorial article in the Wall Street Journal saying, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my career. Why would a pharma company come up with a way to cure its clients? This is the worst business model ever, and its stock will be brutally punished in the next few months. How much do you want to bet that he was right? Go and check the stock of the company. They're not doing very well right now. I mean, I think they're down like 90% from what they were when they first announced the drug.
Pfizer has $3 billion in criminal convictions.
Yeah. And JP Morgan has been convicted of felony offenses, I think 5 or 6 times. Type JP Morgan felony convictions and it will come up. And usually, like, the alternative press that kind of follows the real truth. There we go.
This one?
So it's 4th and 5th felony. Yeah, it's many of them. Wall Street on Parade. So this is a company where the management should be in jail. I don't even know how they're managing to avoid culpability and responsibility here. I mean, I guess because corporations are people. Now I realize why the Supreme Court ruled that way, because that's what absolves the management from culpability unless they get directly charged, right? It's, you basically say, oh, it's the company that did it, it's not me. The company is just an abstract entity. Somebody behind that company who ran it did all of these things. No, it's the company. Company is a person Go sue the company. And remember that meeting when Jamie Dimon had with Elizabeth Warren? She kept berating him about like, how dare you? Like you've robbed all the. It was after the financial crisis, 2011.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was like just when she became senator, they had this big meeting in D.C. I think 2014 or 2015, and they were in the same room and they were getting interviewed, and she kept berating him, saying like, "You've stolen from the American people more than anybody else that I've ever heard of." And she was, I think she was the chairman of the Bank Oversight Committee or something like that. And his response was, "So what? Send me a fine. We can afford it."
Well, what you said kind of reminded me of how the CIA operates. Like in a book called The Secret Team by Fletcher Prouty, he says that they put in their man and it kind of becomes a mesh network, because they'll tell like the higher up at like whatever place they're put, the Navy or something, where they're putting in their CIA guy. They'll tell the director, this guy is a CIA agent. Then the director will get fired or he'll retire or something. Then the new guy will come in and he won't know that guy is a CIA agent. And so it's like this big mesh network, but again, the direct,
nobody knows.
Yeah,
only the CIA knows that they have a guy there.
Exactly. And again, those people that like run these places are just like fall people, to like take blames. And you can't actually blame the whole institution, so it's kind of protected from.
There was a rumor which got confirmed, I think, in the early 2000s that basically the DoD, the Pentagon, was the full organization for anything that the CIA and the NSA would do.
Mm-hmm.
I think the federal government refused to acknowledge the existence of the NSA up until like the late 90s or something like that. Is the reason why it stands for no such agency. They refused to even confirm that it exists. But basically, whenever the NSA, and apparently most of the intel ops abroad are actually NSA, because there's almost always a signal intel component involved, and that's NSA's specialty. But basically, if they send a guy he's also trained in human intel as well, human intelligence. And if anything happens, if any kind of a thing blows up and whatnot, the Pentagon will be the first to take the blame, right? At least publicly. Then the CIA, and only like, I don't know if ever the NSA has ever actually been publicly outed as being behind an operation that's gone bad, even though they're behind most of them.
Well, I wonder if there's an article. Did we talk about it, that there is even a group even more secret than the CIA these days? And so I'm sure they have even more.
Which ones?
I forgot. They called it something. It was some article that I can't remember. Anyways. Okay, let's talk about Idealabs. What's new in Idealabs land?
Well, I mean, we have the new serotonin antagonist synthesized. I just have to find a way to get it from our lab in Bulgaria. So I may have to travel to Bulgaria over the next couple of weeks, because DHL is refusing to ship it. They ask for it, and we've sent chemicals that have been synthesized by our people from Bulgaria before. It's not a controlled chemical, nothing illegal about it, but they looked up its name, and I think they found that article about that French professor who got busted for running a illegal clinical trial with it. So that's all they needed in order to say, no, you can't send it with us. So I may have to go and pick it up personally. And then if that happens, or find another way to ship it, we basically should have that as a new product.
So you're going to have to go to Bulgaria to like get this chemical and bring it back. How could you even bring it back?
Well, actually, mostly to see my parents, whom I haven't seen personally in 2 years. But also, combine that with the taking whatever chemicals DHL refuses to ship.
How about
and I'm not talking about anything illegal. Don't get excited. It's all legal stuff like Sinanserin. We have a little bit of synthesized, but not enough to release the product. I'll first try it on myself for a month or two, see how well it works. Which Sinanserin is another serotonin antagonist, specifically used by the Chinese to treat COVID-19. Of course, you'll never hear about this in the States, and even the Wikipedia page is it only has one sentence about it. But if you read Chinese, if you can read Chinese and go search the Chinese journals, there are tons of publications with it. There's a rumor that maybe that was the Chinese miracle drug and why they never had COVID, aside from it being completely bogus. But whatever little deaths it causes in excess of what was expected, the rumor on Chinese media is that basically that's the drug that was used, Sinanserin. And then we are basically currently testing the fatty acid oxidation inhibitors, just to see which one is the most potent, and then we're going to do toxicity testing. So hopefully that will be another product too. So the 10-methoxyharmalan, which is the serotonin antagonist found to be as potent as LSD, So it will be used in microgram amounts. That's something we have already synthesized in sufficient amounts to release commercially. Second target is sinanserin. And then hopefully that and the fatty acid oxidation inhibitor will be released together after the Carmelan.
Why don't you just send those chemicals to me and then you can come get them here? That'd be good.
Sure. I just having experienced the wonders of Mexican customs, so maybe they're only strict with stuff that's coming from the U.S.
Yeah, no, right. That's actually a terrible idea because I've lost like thousands of dollars importing things here because FedEx and DHL will keep them and they'll tell you that they'll give them back to you and then they never will. And so
they never will. Exactly. Yeah. And it's amazing because you'll think that you're dealing with these reliable companies, but it's actually each one of these companies in each country they operate, it's a separate company. And it's staffed by local people and they're kind of like doing whatever the local rules are. And as I don't know if you've seen the movie Traffic, there's this famous line that law enforcement in Mexico is an entrepreneurial activity, not so much in the States. I think the same thing is true for many other activities, including postal services. Unless you can find a highly placed official in the post office where you can bribe, your stuff, if they determine it's valuable, is probably going to disappear. You'll never see it.
Yeah, I think we talked about this a while ago, but like the maddest I've been in the last 5 years was dealing with FedEx. It was really brutal.
So why can't you call FedEx USA and say, listen, you morons did not deliver my stuff. Give me back my money.
I think that was supposed to happen. I was supposed to get a refund at some point, and it was so dragged out that nobody with a normal obligations could follow it because it was such a long period of time. And they kept making false promises. They'd say like, "Oh, you'll get your stuff or you get your money back on this date," and then that would pass like a month later. It was just well,
then you call your bank and dispute a transaction because you paid for the shipping, right?
Well, you're much smarter on those subjects than I am. I'm just
not smarter, just suffered more through them. Dealing with shipping every day. I mean, this happens all the time. When I send stuff to people and, let's say you pick some customer says, hey, I want you to send it express with FedEx or UPS. Guess what? FedEx and UPS and DHL, even though they continue to advertise these timelines on their page saying like, oh, next day air is next day air. In the fine print, it says that they no longer guarantee even the delivery, let alone the timeline. So you're still paying for the exact same advertised services before with the caveat and disclaimer that basically it's just words. It doesn't apply to it at all. So I've had quite a few occasions where people say, hey, I'm willing to pay extra for overnight mail. And I keep telling them, listen, man or girl, this is not overnight. You keep thinking it's overnight. And I know it says that, but it doesn't work that way anymore.
If I complained to Wells Fargo, they'd probably tell me to go kill myself.
Oh, don't worry. They're so desperate for clients considering how corrupt they are that no, what they'll do is they'll open 3 secret accounts on your name, sign you up for like a few mortgages, sell you a few insurance policies. There's the stuff they're really good at.
Wells Fargo. Okay. You can coach or patreon.com/DanielRowdy. I do coaching right now. It's sold out, unfortunately. Usually people ask me and it usually opens up at the beginning of each month. You can follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/DanielRowdy, but t.me/DanielRowdy is better. And then you can follow Georgi on Twitter as well at twitter.com/hated. Is there anything else that we should address?
I don't know. If you can come up with something, we'll need to answer it.
There is nothing else at the moment that we need to address. Okay, let's. So we've been streaming for about an hour, and let's go for half an hour or a little bit more than that, half an hour and some change, and then we'll get out of here. Okay, and then the schedule is going to be. I put it somewhere on my Twitter. It's going to be. Let me just scroll down here. So today, August 13th, Georgi. Then we'll do August 20th. So next week, and then 27th, Ray. Pete will be back.
Actually, yes. If I'm in Europe, we won't be able to do this.
Okay, so before you go to Europe, we'll have to record a show without an audience and then put it out. Is that what is it?
I don't know if this will work because if I leave, it will be either Monday or Tuesday of this coming week. So
okay, so maybe I will film a Q&A. That's probably what will happen. That's not an issue at all. But will be available for the 27th?
Let's see. 27th is a Friday. I should be. I can't promise though. I mean, like if I go to Europe, all bets are off. I don't even know if I'll be able to return. If they close the borders again, I know it's gonna sound scary, but like it or at least delayed, right? I have some friends who flew through Western Europe on the way to Bulgaria and coming back from Bulgaria, and they got delayed because in Austria and Germany they got asked to produce like a negative test, and the one they did in Bulgaria, the airport people didn't accept it, so they said you have to do a new one. But now the people who are doing the test are not at the airport, so you have to wait. But if you wait, you have to be in quarantine. So it's kind of a messy thing. I'll let you know.
No worries. I'll do it by myself, or I'll find a replacement Georgi for 1 week.
There's plenty of people willing to talk to Ray. I'm certain.
I'm sure there is. Yeah,
to just fine.
You have big shoes to fill. Okay, so let's. What were the other ones that I really liked? That kid one was pretty good. The metabolically children are different species. Yeah.
And this directly ties to the subject of what is it, neoteny? Where basically retaining childhood-like features. Multiple studies have shown that this is related to very high levels of the active thyroid hormone T3. In fact, I have an article on the forum post that is, I think, as early as 2014, saying that the chimpanzee bonobos, they're actually our closest genetic relative, retain their youthful appearance throughout their entire life, and eventually when they die not of old age, but they die from either a predator attack, trauma, or some kind of an infectious disease, but not from aging. And the reason they retain their neoteny features is their very high levels of T3. And this study demonstrated that, basically discovered that children have such a high metabolic rate that if this was actually done in the animal world, it would not even be considered the same species. So children's metabolic rate peaks, I think, at the age of 5, where it is more than 50% higher than an adult's metabolic rate, resting metabolic rate. And if I try to find information on some different species, and the highest that I was able to find in terms of difference between children and adults, between young and adults, was I think like 27%. So 50 is almost 2 times higher. So that's basically, again, reminding me of Ray's claim that children are our evolutionary future. Yeah. Because basically, you pick any animal species, the children, the young of that species resembles the adults of species of high evolutionary complexity.
Yeah, I'm looking for the PubMed article that talks about the specific changes in the pulse rate from a young age, like a neonate, to 12 years old. It's something like 140 beats per minute at a neonate, and then it reduces down to like 85 at 12 years old. But it happens very quickly, you know?
The interesting thing is that according to the actuarial tables, the lowest rate of death is at the age of between 11 and 12. So that's and I think Ray said that this is when the total iron stores in the body are the lowest.
Yeah, I can't find it. This was kind of funny. This was like low carb people bragging how low their heart rates were. So this was heart rate 42 beats per minute. You got me beat. 45 beats per minute. This carnivore way of eating is killing me. 39 beats per minute. Like
I've beat them all. At the height of my keto, I was at 33.
Holy
and that's when basically I had such a massive headache and all of the neurological symptoms. And my doctor was ecstatic. He said, basically, wow, your heart is like a metronome. It's barely beating.
That, what did Broda Barnes said the pulse rate was the tempo of life. And then Ray said it was how alive the person was. And then these references, I think I stole this from Kyle Mumminus, and the thyroid and the heart. And he says, moreover, there is increasing evidence that thyroid hormone has a direct chronotropic effects on the heart that are independent of the sympathetic nervous system, i.e. not of adrenaline.
Yeah, and progesterone is another one that has positive chronotropic and ionotropic effects. And by the way, progesterone actually has direct anti-sympathetic nervous system effects. I think it directly lowers the release of adrenaline and also increases its degradation, yet still increases the heart rate. So, some people say, well, that's because it increases the synthesis of T3. That's part of it, but it also has its independent own positive chronotropic and ionotropic effects that are I guess of unknown origin. Some of it is by opposing adrenaline, some of it is by promoting T3 synthesis, but a good portion of them are unique to progesterone.
Can't believe I can't find this. Whatever. Okay. Was that everything on that one?
I think the
children one?
that was pretty much it. Basically, it's like, yeah, studying 50%, separate species. I think the interesting thing is that basically they're saying that their study discovered that the metabolic rate doesn't decline between the age of 20 and 60, which I thought was absurd. There's a huge number of studies demonstrating a decline in the heart rate and temperature between the age of actually after about 24. I think 25 is when you're really young, and after that you start declining, right? And they're saying that after the age of 90, humans use about 26% less energy daily. That's also complete BS. Multiple studies demonstrate if you're dieting, and if you're elderly and dieting, your energetic requirements can drop from 2,000 calories daily. I'm using this as an average to about 700 daily, and you could still be gaining weight if you eat like even 100 calories more. So it's definitely not 26% less energy daily at the age of 90. It's more like 60 to 70% less, even if you're healthy.
Well, isn't it slightly confusing because if you just say metabolism, thyroid could be supporting the metabolism, or adrenaline and cortisol could be supporting the metabolism. And so I think that word is kind of non-specific. So again, the adrenaline and cortisol rise in old age, and somebody could have a high temperature and a high pulse rate, and they'll be like, oh, they have good rate of metabolism, even though it's adrenaline and cortisol.
Yep, exactly. So the way so temperature and heart rate are important, but also it's also the amount of excreted water, which I thought was a pretty good, and of course the Achilles tendon reflex. But I think the most non-invasive one is actually even without measuring temperature and heart rate. If you're drinking, let's say, 2 liters of water and peeing out 1 liter, you're only burning 1,000 calories a day. Yeah. So you basically you evaporate a liter of fluid for every 1,000 calories you burn. So if you're drinking 3 liters of liquids a day and you're only peeing out 1 liter, then you're burning 2,000 calories.
Just a minute. You have to put your food calories into like a chronometer or something, and then each liter is 1,000 calories. But it's not. Did you just say just liquid?
Well, I think all liquids, basically, like you have to take into account what's in the food as well. But unless you're eating so most people, they'll eat relatively dry food as food, and then they'll drink the liquid separately. But if you're eating a lot of broth, soups, etc., stews, then most of the liquid, most of your like extra fluid intake will probably come from the food and not necessarily a separate drink.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that, because I think that's what the question of like, why am I gaining weight? I think that could always be in conjunction with doing this experiment. So making sure people are not home that day, and taking a liter bottle, discarding the morning urine, so not the very first urine of the day, and then collecting the rest of it, and then tracking your food in something like Chronometer. So if you eat 2,500 calories per day, but you pee out 1.5 liters, so like 1,500 calories, that would be a perfect explanation. It would explain that a person has a hypometabolism, and they're not burning many calories that day. And so that would give a person an instantaneous answer to the question of why am I gaining weight, et cetera, et cetera.
And a great indication and confirmation that the carbs, or specifically sugar, and like fructose, glucose, things from that you get from honey, or like raw ripe fruit, that actually they raise the metabolic rate, is that try to drink sweetened liquids such as, let's say, Coke, Mexican Coke, and then look at how often you pee, and then try to drink the same amount of water. The same amount of fluid as water or anything else that doesn't contain any carbs. You'll see that you will pee most of the fluid in the latter case, but you'll actually pee a lot less, if anything, when you're actually drinking the sugar stuff. You are evaporating most of it because your metabolic rate increases when you're eating or drinking the sweet stuff.
A lot of people are requesting Kyle Mamoudis as a guest host. I don't think he'd want to do it, though.
Why? Is he like abrasive and he dislikes speed or something?
I don't know. Kyle's a very interesting person with very normal standard views, but I'll leave it at that.
Very normal and standard views?
By the way, I love Kyle. I think of him like a brother, and so not making fun of him in any way, shape, or form. But we can ask him. Okay, so let's jump over to... Okay, what are we? It's about a little over an hour 15 here. Okay, what? Citric acid.
I thought the manufacture of citric acid is a powerful inflammatory.
Yes.
Because Ray always makes a point. Well, I shouldn't say always, but no matter when we talk to him, he kind of always tries to slip in the caution that using commercial supplements or commercial foods, like if people are not reacting well to cheese or dairy, his usual go-to is that, well, there's probably some kind of a contaminant in that food that's making them react badly. And a lot of people are saying, like, what are you talking about, Ray? I'm drinking this liquid, this tea, and all it has is basically tea leaves, sugar, water, and citric acid, or like ascorbic acid, aka vitamin C, or like sodium benzoate. And then like he would usually say, oh, well, if it's vitamin C, it's probably has like heavy metal contamination, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think he's ever said anything about citric acid except in its role in the as the metabolite in the citric acid cycle, and also as a potential tumor activator.
Oh, yeah.
But this study specifically says that, well, even if natural citric acid that we synthesize in our bodies or ingest, like if it's pure and non-contaminated, if that one's risky, then you should really be afraid of the so-called manufactured variety, because that one, so there used to be up until the 1950s, citric acid was extracted from citrus juice, right? Because that's where it's present in the highest amounts. But then after that, somebody figured out a way to actually extract it from this fungus called Aspergillus niger. And some people, like, it's a really fascinating pathogen. Aside from causing allergies and like and upper respiratory tract infections, now there's solid evidence that it may cause even cancer, several cancers, including melanoma. So anyways, the study found that the so-called manufactured citric acid, the commercially produced one, is almost invariably extracted from this fungus. It's heavily contaminated with remnants, residues of this fungus. Genetic material and other things that are coming from the fungus. And they report several case studies where basically consumption of this manufactured citric acid triggered a number of serious inflammatory conditions, including the very common these days, irritable bowel syndrome. But they actually state in the study they think it can actually consume in sufficiently high amounts and chronically. It may even trigger inflammatory bowel disease such as Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. So basically, yet another extremely common additive present in more than 70% in foods, in commercial foods and or beverages, more than 70% contain this manufactured citric acid. And even though technically the molecules of this citric acid and the natural one are the same, the one that's basically making its way into our food and drink supply is heavily contaminated with remnants of this fungus from which it is extracted, and potentially heavy metals as well. So it's really not benign. And the vendors that are using it as a food additive are not required at all to report it on the label. And worst of all, FDA grandfathered it the same GRAS status, which is generally regarded as safe, as the original citric acid, which the FDA did do studies on its safety and did find it relatively safe. But for the manufactured citric acid, the FDA simply grandfathered it in without bothering to do any tests or asking for any toxicity tests to be done. And now the study is saying that this was a massive mistake, because apparently this is a very, very highly pro-inflammatory substance, even in low amounts.
Yeah, this is a great article. I remember eating those Haribo gummies literally like 10 years ago. And I looked at the ingredients. So I was like, oh, they're not too bad. They just, and I noted the citric acid in it, and they upset my stomach so badly. And this must have been in like 2012. And I emailed Ray, and he was like, he said exactly this article. He said that citric acid is made using a fungus that's extremely irritating. And so this is,
and if you remember the recent article about silica that I had, activating directly the endotoxin receptor. Yeah. Well, between silica and citric acid and ascorbic, his statements on ascorbic acid, right? He's saying that dioxide. People said, "Hey, what do you think of vitamin C?" And he always, every single time somebody asks him this question, his response always is that, well, the original studies that Linus Pauling did with it were extremely positive, but he's basically saying, like, since then, I've never found a commercial vendor whose product I tried and it set well with me. It's always caused some kind of like irritation.
Yeah, maybe we could go over a quick list of irritants in food. So citric acid, gums,
vitamin C,
carrageenan, right? Vitamin C,
and silicon dioxide, right? The benzoates, the sodium benzoate is entirely chemically synthesized, and I wouldn't be surprised if it suffers from the same contamination issue, even though it's not extracted from a fungus, but it's still it's an industrial byproduct. similar to fish oil. So without the toxicity of fish oil, it's got its own toxicities. And by the way, it's also apparently considered GRAS, generally regarded as safe by the FDA, which means I think manufacturers are allowed to add it in virtually any amount and not even reported in some cases on the label. But it's never had actual toxicity/safety studies done on it. So these 4 things are probably, and malic acid too. Malic acid is another common preservative used when it's more expensive to make than citric acid, so it's more rarely used. But I've seen it on product labels.
I don't think it's in the same category, but Ray went pretty hard on MCT oil on the interview with Kate Deering. I think it's okay to use on the skin, but if a person has sensitive digestion, that could cause irritation or diarrhea or something.
Yeah.
Any changes in Idealabs formulations?
Nope. Actually, people are thrilled, and you reminded me. Next time I send you something, I will send you my progesterone formulation in vitamin E with MCT oil. Now, if you dare take it orally, I would like you to tell me how you feel in terms of effects between that and well, let's say another formulation, because I think the effects are very, very different, and the one in with MCT oil maybe seems to target the digestive system more, considering that it's less absorbed through the lymphatic tract, right?
Okay, forget.
But it's got several people reported to me that formulation resolved like a long-standing inflammatory issues in their GI tract, which like other formulations did not. And I'm sure you know about the reports. Some people said like that using progesterone in vitamin E and olive oil like messed up their mood or like their like menstrual cycle and things like that. I don't know if Ray has ever addressed those concerns, but specifically as far as mood and digestion, the MCT formulation, and you don't have to put much. It's just 10% or and I think at those amounts, it's not likely to cause an allergic reaction. It's the vitamin E, because if it's most of the liquid is vitamin E, that's really the main thing that can cause the main allergen if it actually causes a side effect.
Great stuff. Okay, 1 hour 51 minutes. Okay, we can. I think we went over most of these that I wanted to talk about. Maybe the doxycycline.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
Okay.
And the good thing is this is a human study, which demonstrated that I think it was an in vitro study, a mouse study, and a human study. Unfortunately, I couldn't get. They did not list the human dosage. That's the other thing. Yes, that's what annoyed me about it. I remember there was something that I really hated about that study, and that is that their case report that they included the human case study, because they actually did an in vitro study, did an animal study, and then they reported a case study with a human patient that they had, and they did not report what dosage of doxycycline the person was using. And I thought, why? Like, why would you do that? But extrapolating from the mouse study is basically the typical doxycycline dosage, about 200 milligrams daily. I suspect that's what the human patient was using. And that person had disseminated, in other words, metastatic melanoma. And after embarking on the doxycycline regimen, basically the metastasis disappeared and the main tumor, the primary tumor, remained dormant and even shrank in size. So in the mouse, actually, I think they actually mentioned the word cure, the one that was told to never mention in regards to aspirin, right there. The antibiotics extended the lifespan of, and in some cases, even cured the mice.
But Georgi, the antibiotics will destroy the microbiome.
I'm sure it will. So if you have metastatic melanoma, that's the least of your worries, even assuming the microbiome is beneficial.
I think there is a point to make, like in terms of what Ray has said about antibiotics. He's like pro the penicillins, the macrolides, the tetracyclines. But I think he did tell me in an exchange, he thought some antibiotics were extremely harmful. And so it's not like all antibiotics are created equal.
Yeah, of course they are. Like the ciprofloxacin. The fluoroquinolones are extremely dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason I think he would ever consider them, I think I saw an email a few years ago. Somebody asked him, basically had like a very persistent nerve, like root canal infection.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't responding to the penicillin, the tetracycline, and whatever the doctor threw it. And then I think Ray's response was that, well, I'm pretty sure the Levaquin, which is a member of the fluoroquinolone antibiotics, that will cure it, but I would not take it for more than a week, regardless of what the dentist says.
I asked for questions just to see what people are saying before we bail out here. What do you look for when you buy cheese? What are the red flags? What do you look for when you buy cheese, Georgi?
Oh, I think I asked that question on the forum when I posted a study about manufactured citric acid. Somebody came back and said the same thing is true of cheese. Like they have this, the vegetable enzymes or the cheese enzymes or vegetable rennet, I think it's called rennet or rennet. Yeah. So they're saying that all of these are also highly allergenic, and they've confirmed this with discussions with Pete. So you should look for something that says animal rennet. Those are the only things that are apparently like the only extra additive to make the cheese that is acceptable. Pretty much everything else is likely to be a potent allergen. And the ones that tend to be without additives and less allergenic are like the aged cheeses like Parmigiano Reggiano, and like Pecorino Romano, and some of the cheddar cheeses. Apparently, like use either vegetable rennet or animal rennet, or I forgot what other enzyme of animal origin that's causing the curding. But basically, the discussion on the forum was that in addition to citric acid, if you're getting anything with cheese, you better read the label because they're required to list the enzymes that were used to make the cheese. If it says anything of vegetable origin, it's apparently something that's extracted or made from soy. So aside from the allergenic thing, it's also estrogenic. And again, reminds me, like, I'm sure you've seen people have asking, saying, like, Ray, I've tried many types of dairy. They don't see it well with me. What do you think the issue is, even with cheese? And he's specifically discussed the thing about the rennet and the enzymes used to make the cheese.
Yeah, vegetable rennet, microbial rennet, cultures, and enzymes can all be allergenic, I think. And then Parmigiano Reggiano is really one of the only cheeses that I would have confidence in, because it's still made in a traditional way, but you can even still accidentally buy Parmesan and it will look exactly similar, but it could be made in a totally different way.
What about the pecorinos, which is raw cheese?
I think that, I think that there was, when I lived in California, that one was also made in a similar way that Parmigiano Reggiano was.
Yeah, it's made from raw sheep milk, and I think this is supposed to be very similar.
Great. And then Gene says, Georgi mentioned that supplement that the Chinese use to treat the virus. How do you spell it? I'm going to show my dad. Do you? Sinanserin.
It's C-I-N. You can Google it so they can see it on the screen. C-I-N-A-N-S-E-R-I-N.
Sinanserin. Okay, here we go. Just scanning this before we bail here.
Just open the Wikipedia page, and then let's see if they've deleted the sentence there about COVID, because it used to have.
Well, didn't we check that last time and it wasn't there?
Oh wow, it disappeared. I don't see. Oh, there we go. Oh yeah, it's still. If you increase the size, it says, yeah, there we go. Oh, you found some kind of a strange page in Polish or something.
This is very good content.
How is this possible? Why is it showing like these pages in foreign language?
The boomer tech here. I don't know. Am I on Spanish? I don't think so.
Let's see.
Is this
there you go.
Oh, here we go.
The second link. Yeah, the molecule is an inhibitor of the 3C-like protease of SARS. And somebody specifically asked Ray what they can do for COVID-19, and he said anti-serotonin chemicals can help, but Sinanserin is specifically targeting like the coronaviruses and that are causing SARS/COVID-19.
Michael says, Danny, have you tried Quiritos? It's a typical dish from Michoacan. Boiled pork meat and pork skin and oranges, sugar, Coca-Cola, salt. It's almost if Pete would have made it himself
with Coca-Cola. So it's like soup that's salty, but it's got Coke in it. That's awesome.
That sounds delicious. I'll have to try that. Thank you, Michael. Ask about ginger's benefits. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, some of the things like gingerol and shogaol, which are some of the active compounds, are antagonists of the 5-HT3 and 5-HT4 receptors.
Great stuff.
So it's got a decent anti-serotonin effect. But with that said, some other studies have demonstrated some of those constituents, they didn't isolate them, but they said an extract like an ethanol extract of ginger root, which contains many of these, including the shogaols and the gingerols, had estrogenic effects. But since it didn't separate them into individual components and test those individually, we don't know what's the estrogenic fraction, which one. I don't know if it's the shogaol and gingerol, because if it is, then you're getting the anti-serotonin effect, but you're also getting the estrogenicity.
Okay, a few more here. Gun to your head. What antidote stack would you take for the vaccine?
If you're taking the mRNA vaccine, I would say the inflammatory response is probably your biggest concern. Well, actually, the biggest concern is incorporation into the DNA, and I don't think there's any defense against that, unless you're willing to really play Russian roulette and take some of the antiretroviral drugs like azovodyne, I think is the most famous one for HIV. In other words, that it inhibits the enzyme reverse transcriptase. Short of that, I would avoid taking the mRNA vaccine. And then for the DNA ones, the DNA vector vaccines, again, making sure you take something with a strong anti-inflammatory effect and anti-serotonin as well, because at this point it's been established that most of the cases of lethality associated with the vaccines, if it wasn't blood clot driven, it was likely acute serotonin syndrome.
These questions are okay, Georgi, you think?
Okay. Yeah, but I don't want to.
Okay. Well, I
don't want to get it to turn into another.
I know. They're very general. Is that okay?
Yes, but I don't want to get this to turn into a Q&A session.
Okay, never mind. We'll stop this. There are some legality things here, guys, so that's why we don't do Q&As with specifically Georgi here. Okay, I guess that's it. Is there anything you want? Maybe talk about Idealabs one more time.
We can do another article maybe. We've talked enough about Idealabs. The important thing is it's still afloat, still not shut down.
Okay, well, we're at 2 hours. Maybe we should probably wrap it up here. Yeah. Okay, so there might not be a Georgi episode next week. I'll probably film a Q&A or something like that. You know what? There was one question here that was not was okay. Let me just get into
Which one?
Here. Scrolling up. How are you guys keeping your cool while the Wild Wild West rages on? Any tips so we can close with that?
What do you mean by the fires that are raging, the heat, or like the social Wild Wild West?
My interpretation of that is things are getting worse every week. Things are accelerating so quickly. How do you maintain frame?
I'm not keeping my cool. If anybody thinks I'm keeping my cool, that's just because you and I are having a friendly discussion. I mean,
you're going
the rest
crazy
of the time,
inside.
my life is a freaking disaster, like putting out one fire after another, and wondering what to do. But at the end of the day, I think it will literally come down to what percentage of the population will be willing to say a hard no and do things like what the French are starting to do, and like block roads, go on like massive strikes, on what I want to say Occupy, but to remember the Occupy Wall Street movement. I think now we need something like that, but on steroids, and start like blocking like federal buildings and state buildings and whatnot. I mean, you'll be surprised how quickly things can change if, let's say, the DC mayor building got surrounded by a few thousand people and they didn't let her get out of the building or like get into the building. She'll be very, very, let's say, reluctant to push any hard measures such as secret COVID testing for your child, or demanding that your child is vaccinated before he can go back to school. She's already kind of softened up on some of her measures, but of course, since she's following orders from above, I think the softening up is just temporary. So, short question, I'm not keeping my cool. I'm just doing the best I can to get through the day. Find solace in the fact that even if there's a total social collapse, unless there's an all-out war, which nobody can really be safe in such a situation, I can survive just as fine without the government and its crap. Actually, probably better than with it. So part of me wants a collapse, but knows that if that comes, a lot of innocent people will probably burn, including potentially me and my family. So I don't know what to want at this point. Maybe just, if this drags on for a little longer, I'm hoping that a sufficient number of people will just open their eyes and say, whatever the reason is, this is all done on purpose, and we're saying no. And even if that leads to, I don't know, secession of certain states and establishing an independent country, if that's the most peaceful way to go about it, then I'll support it and probably move there. But I don't have any solutions. I mean, I think somebody asked, right, like, what do you do to protect yourself and prepare for the incoming collapse? Like, can you do anything financially? He said no. He used to say buy a farm, like make sure you have land and things like that. But in the last podcast, if you remember, he said they will come after you if you're a big landowner or you have a farm. first with tax, and then soon after that with regulations, and they'll essentially destroy your livelihood making if you have farms with animals. They'll find a way. They'll pass some regulations saying like all the chickens have to be vaccinated for COVID. And guess what? You vaccinate them for COVID, they die. Well, that means it works, Georgi. So go and find other chickens or other things to do.
I'll just throw this out there. I completely agree with you, by the way, that we did have a call with Ray that I didn't set this up. Somebody else did. And Ray was about as positive on Mexico as you could possibly be, thinking that it would resist a lot of the effects of what was happening. And so he was so positive about it. And it was I expected him not to be so, he was just, again, it was just overwhelming positivity about the resistance, the spirit of Mexico in the face of everything that was happening. And so it was interesting to hear him talk about it. But I agree with you. I don't think there's anything, it's an unsolvable problem. And what can you do about that? You can do as much as you can to prepare and things like that. But
maintain your health as much as you can, and the health of the ones around you. Like a poor health can really do you in such situation. If you start getting food shortages, like electricity goes out, water stops, stuff like that, you need able-bodied people to essentially run around and provide food, medication, water, whatnot for the rest, right? So even a single chronically ill person in the family, severely chronically ill, that cannot take care of themselves, can really throw a wrench into your whole plan, especially if it involves moving to another country and things like that. So focus on your health. Try to be around like-minded people at least an hour a day. Not too much, because then it starts becoming an echo chamber. But then there is not much benefit in trying to change, I think, people's minds of the ones that are truly gone. You can tell the ones that are truly gone. I think most of us at this point have an intuition that's tuned enough to know when a person is out there to really have a conversation with you, even if they don't agree with you, but at least have a conversation and be exposed to other ideas, or they're just looking for a way to impose their ideas on you. As Aristotle once said, the only true mark of high intelligence is the capacity to hold sincerely a view that is directly opposing of your own. Right? And even if they don't agree with it. And if you can do that and the person in front of you can do that, then you're a good company. If not, then I don't think there's any benefit hanging out with each other.
Straight from the source, Darth Georgi Dinkov here. Let me read these really quickly. Jerry St. Ong for $10. Thank you so much. David Hendricks, Gita Ag, Peggy T. Hey, Peggy. Ian's Insight, Marcelo Rivadenira. Thank you guys so much. Sincerely appreciate it. I wish I could see more of these, but as you can see me clicking this button, I cannot see the other people that have donated. This is ridiculous. Okay, guys, thank you so much. I'll have something for you next week. I don't know exactly what it will be. We'll see how it goes. And then after that, we'll have something with Ray Pete as well. And it might be with just me or somebody else. We'll see. And then everybody wish well to Georgi in his travels. Are you gonna be like? Do you need a vaccine to fly?
Not yet. That's why I'm kind of trying to go now, because I'm concerned. And you saw that quote from Biden saying that they're considering imposing their vaccination requirements for a flight. So if I don't go to Bulgaria in the next month or so, I'm afraid that by winter or by late fall, we will already be in a situation where they'll say, you need the vaccine to travel internationally. I'm sure. Now, I don't know how they can impose this on non-citizens, because I'm not a U.S. citizen yet, but they can probably prevent me from coming back. They'll probably say, if you want to leave, but you're not coming back. So if I go, I have to go now before things become impossible, because Canada is doing it, and the U.S. is considering doing, which means there's already probably plenty in the works. In
Australia, and I think New Zealand also did that. They said...
You cannot come in and you cannot leave.
You cannot come in, you cannot go out, or something crazy like that.
Or both New Zealand and Australia, you cannot. Basically, they're saying they're so safe right now that no refugees will be allowed, or no citizens, no refugees, nobody. Nobody's leaving and nobody's coming in. Now, I am not sure if this is legal to tell a resident you cannot leave. That's borderline. I mean, we already know that they want you to do that, and they're probably doing it. But I'm not sure if it's entirely legal, because that's borderline monarchy. You're not their property, right? So if another country is willing to accept you, and you have the legal right to enter that country, let's say you go to the Ecuadorian embassy in Australia and they say, yeah, sure, here is a permanent residence permit or whatever, come to our country, I'm not sure Australia can legally stop you from going to Ecuador unless you're a criminal. I mean, I think the Constitution doesn't allow that. Now, of course, they'll do it, but let's see for how long people will tolerate this. Australia is a big country. Maybe that's what's saving the Australians. There's so much to do in such a big country for the population that lives there. For more densely populated countries, like I think if India would try to do something like that, the country will collapse overnight. Everybody will be up in arms.
Longest outro ever. Okay, Georgi Dinkov, thank you so much. Everybody listening and watching in the future, thank you guys so much. Give this episode a like, really helps us out. And go to t.me/Danny Roddy. I think that's it. Yeah, Danny Roddy. And that's the Telegram channel that we've been putting a lot of content out of. Okay, Georgi, thank you so much. You're my partner in crime. Sincerely appreciate you taking time out of your day to hang out with me. And everybody watching, thank you guys so much. Okay, take care. Have a great, peaceful weekend. Okay, bye, everyone.
Thank you.